right, we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Wine Shark Wednesday. Your host, Wine Shark, here again to chat with you about all kinds of fun things in the wine world. Hope everybody is having an excellent week. It has been very busy and productive here, I must say. Pour myself a little of something to lubricate the palate while we chit chat. So, what's been up in the last week? The what's new portion of our show. Well, let's see. Lots of things going on in the industry regarding a lot of the stuff, the racial discussions and things that are going around the country right now in a very good way. It's been a painful conversation amongst the wine industry, very specifically regarding the Court of Master Sommeliers has had some very interesting things going on as far as that's concerned. And while they're painful, they need to happen. I'm very glad to see that that the court is in the spotlight and being put on the spot and forced to kind of think about what's going on. I think the industry itself is also addressing itself and how to be proactive and take a stand, because being colorblind is not inclusion, and opening up opportunities and having inclusive attitudes is the key to getting through this. And so I'm glad that this change is needed and that we are going to keep forward and keep acting. So that's been kind of cool. Saying hello to Donna and Dave and Mary. There, hello to everybody. They're early in the chat there. Welcome. So I think that's it. Overall, I said, I've been reading up on a bunch about it and been very, very happy to see that the industry, I think, is taking the right steps forward. This is a tough time for everybody to kind of come to realizations, but yeah. So that's kind of fun. We got the rest of the schedules kind of in line for July, which is all wrapped up. So that's good. Starting to think about August pairings and starting to really kind of sink into the summer heat here in Texas. So it's been very, what's the right word for it? I don't know. I guess I've been thoughtful regarding what's going to happen in the next few days. The whole idea of the rest of summer and trying to figure out what good wine matches and wine pairings we have, especially since outdoor activities have been kind of limited. So I think the good news is private outdoor activities are still well in the good. So get around your pool, get into your backyard, get your grill on, relax, enjoy those evenings, and pop a bottle and enjoy some cool stuff. So we did the Wine Grilled show just a little while back, a couple weeks back, and that was really kind of formative in remembering, we got to get out there and do some of this thing. So very, very cool. Anyhow, today's topic, we are going to be talking about wine fads again. This, I think, is the third of our wine fads series. We're going to talk about spirit barrel aged wines. This kind of goes in the trend of stick everything in a bourbon barrel that's been happening for the last, right now about 5 or 6 years. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And in fact, a grocery store grab today, like last week when we talked about formatting, aligns with that as well. We've got the Robert Mondavi Select Private Selection Bourbon Barrel Aged Cabernet Sauvignon. So we're not only going to talk about it, we're going to prove it or drink it or put our discussion where our mouths are, because that's where discussion comes from. So there you go. Anyway, so what is it? What are spirit barrel aged wines? I hesitate to say bourbon barrel, although bourbon barrels are far and away the most common example, but I have seen other examples using tequila barrels. So spirit barrel aged rums barrels are also kind of in the mix, but in small frequency. So spirit barrel age is kind of the moniker that I'm going to use for this discussion. And so what are they? Basically, this is where you take a wine and take it out of its traditional oak barrel and put it in an untraditional oak barrel, either that has been previously used for the production of some other spirit, tequila, bourbon, or rum, are the examples that we were just using. So it usually spends about 2 to 4 months in those barrels, and it's designed to help. The idea is to extract and add flavor to the wine that those spirits left lingering in the barrel itself. Okay. So that's the basic concept. This was something that was kind of inherited as a crossover from the beer world. Back in 2009 in the beer world, Goose Island kind of pioneered this idea of using bourbon barrel aging for some of their wines. And in the 1990s, sorry, not 2009, 1990s. But then it was about 2014 when Fetzer Brands created a sub-label called A Thousand Stories. And this was the first of the bourbon barrel aged red wines. Okay. So this kind of dovetailed slash piggybacked on the popularity of bourbon. Bourbon kind of had a resurgence in the late 1990s, early 2000s, especially with the rise of the modern craft cocktail movement. And so, with bourbon getting that kind of attention, it was just natural that eventually ideas started blending. If it's good over here, what can we do over there? So, with Goose Island picking it up in the 90s, then the beer and wine world tend to have some Venn diagram overlap in various ways. In fact, we're going to do a whole separate show about beer wine hybridization and the kind of mix mash in the modern sense over the last 5 years or so of things that have gone. A lot of fun topics we'll talk about there. But anyway, this is an area where we talked about bourbon leading beer, leading wine. So from the mid 20 from 2014, the growth and popularity of this product has just skyrocketed. The demand apparently was certainly there. The branding and marketing were on point, and they saw a growth in from $800,000 of sales in 2015 to over 91 million in 2018. So yeah, obviously they struck a chord. They found a thing, and this is certainly a very good example of a popularization of a fad. So can't complain about that piece. But the the fact is, everybody doing it. I mean, from looking around at various producers, from the big to small. I mean, Fetzer is no small brand. It wasn't like some, this is kind of the opposite of that craft thing. Goose Island, by the way, not a small beer maker by any stretch of the imagination. So this was some big guys doing and messing around with some funky ideas, letting their folks experiment, and they had the platform enough to both risk and capitalize it. So there is that. But I'll tell you, the from the big to the medium size, everybody's got something in the game now. Whether it's Fetzer, Gallo, Robert Mondavi, like we're talking about over here, Kettle Jackson Wines and their product and families have got some. You've got all kinds of folks that are. I mean, even my one of my heroes, Jed Steele, produced a limited run for some folks back in Alabama, southeast of the country, and really leveraging that belt between bourbon and wine. So it's not. It is definitely growing. It's not, and this is the weird part where we got to define what a fad may or may not be. It's certainly not a flash in the pan. Let's put it that way. Has now more than 5 years of kind of recognition. They're doing a lot of marketing for it. So yeah, a whole thing when we talk about the spirit barrel aging concept. So saying hi to John and Mark Midland, Betty and Mark in from 93 degrees to 104 on Sunday. Yeah, you guys have got it hot out there too. I tell you. Nobody enjoying the out of doors during the height of the day. So, what are the effects of this spirit barrel aging process? This 2 to 4 months in these barrels, in these used barrels. Well, limiting most of the conversation to the bourbon barrel pour part of things, because that is what we're trying today. And generally speaking, it is by far the dominant side of the market. We get things like smoke, charred flavors. You get some of this burnt sugar and such as a dominant flavor that kind of tends to overcome the wine. The wines trend towards sweeter on the bulk, but that's not necessarily true. There are some dry styles out there as well. The tannins within the wine become kind of muted and soft. There's a couple of reasons for this. Number one, tannins are imparted by oak, but the way that they come across in the wine, basically the interactions that those polyphenols are having, cause them to be they take third or fourth place in the mouth, and they're very, very greatly softened, which We'll speak about why that's a plus or why that's a feature in a minute. The alcohol in the wines tends to trend high, although that's not always the case. You can get some residual effects and see wines that are pushing that 15, 16% alcohol by volume rate. Okay. So, the those are kind of the effects that you see that are kind of purposeful. Some of the pejorative speaking about the wine as far as the effects. One of the things that critics would say, myself kind of included, although I'm more on the tasting, much more on the tasting side than on the growing side, um, is the fact that and this is based on some of the producers that are going involved here too, but barrels can and additive flavors like that can mask flawed or substandard fruit, meaning in an age where people are trying to rein in their oak use and trying to allow flavors of the grape to come to the fore to define and nuance their wines, you kind of got to wonder why throwing this giant bourbon stick in there is a good idea. And not only because, and we'll talk about why they're separate classes in a minute, but also that just is it all about the concept of masking? Is there a thing where you can cut a corner? I mean, we've talked about inexpensive wines at that bottom end of the barrel, no pun intended, really end up doing a lot of shortcutting. And is this one of those methods where by throwing in this overt thing, you're basically covering up another hang? Look over here so you're not looking over there. Mary asked, do they char wine barrels? Yes, as a matter of fact, they do, although they call it toasting. That depends on the degree of toast that you can get, especially when it comes to wines used in white wines, specifically Chardonnays, for instance, often have a degree of toast. So that is, for the flavor in itself, not uncommon, that smokiness to it. But then again, it depends on the type of oak you're using, new, neutral, older oaks, and what level of toast do you like. That's all kind of a dial yield that the winemaker is doing when they're ordering cooperage. Remember that this is also all about the economy. Specifically, the bourbon economy wanting to sell off bourbon barrels that have no further use to them because they only use them once. Number two, the inexpensive used barrels versus new cooperage allows opportunities to use wine barrels that then are less expensive than their traditional original counterparts. So you can see where some of the efficiencies are made within that concept. Okay. So a bit, that idea of masking, that idea of additive flavor, that's kind of where the thing that I caught my attention when I first started seeing this trend really come up, and why I haven't really caught into it in general. But let's talk about some of the gimmicks. If you look at the marketing of this thing, this is the reason why I think that it is much along the lines of a fad slash hype, and that they're pushing a shit ton of marketing at you. And I mean, they've got these attempts to, if you look at by the broad, they're very much attempts to tail on to the perceived bourbon crowd, the perceived bourbon demographic. And these wines are very much being targeted at the younger wine drinking demographic, anywhere from say 25 to 35 is really where they think their sweet spot is. Although data from wine.com shows that actually it's 45 to 50 that are actually supporting the market growth in this. But what you're seeing is this very, very purposeful attempt to push bourbon type mentalities. A lot of the wines, by the way, are very masculine portrayed. An underserved market in general in the wine world. Most, the wine drinking, generally speaking, is looked at as basically woman targeted marketing. And my own demographics kind of bear this out as well for the number of students I have. As far as interest is concerned, it's probably about 70-30. So I'll tell you that getting any guys to drink, especially new to wine people, new guys that are drinking wine, getting them into this idea, especially with the rosé all day crowd, which is very perceived as very feminine, not masculine. Therefore, what are you going to do? You're going to target them with denim and black labels and bourbon and manly things that you do when you char barrels and fire and wood and smoke, manly things, right? So they very much go for this. They've also tried to align this idea of oak is quality, which is an American perception that goes a long way back. While it's true that fine wines and good oak barrels, which are expensive, is a good part of fine winemaking. It is, unfortunately, we've wrapped it up in our Americana tradition of, well, little is good, then more must be better. And that's a classic case where you look towards some criticisms of the American wine industry. That's a lot of what you see in there is too much, too much, too much. It's one of those, if 10 is good, then 50 must be 5 times as good, which is not really good, not really kosher. They also got this kind of rebel spirit, reinvention, lifestyle marketing kind of thing. Like I said, in a lot of the visuals, it's all steel and stave and black and fire and dark colors and wood with rivets in it. And, they don't, also several of the places, they don't call their winemakers, they call them cellar masters or wine smiths. They're very much trying to evoke this idea of, you want to buy this wine because you want to feel or look like this. And that lifestyle marketing thing to me is always very fringy to me. I don't like that. I want you to talk to me about your product. I want you to stop trying to tell me that the beverage I drink defines me, and therefore screw you. I encourage you guys to see through that level of bullshit when it comes to wine or spirits or beer in general, and well, for that matter, in your life in general, but very specifically when it comes to this type of thing. I have not really participated in this trend because, to me, it goes under two parts. So let's talk about the editorial portion of this, the thoughts portion of it, the WineShark take. Um, these were not wines in the traditional sense of the word. These are not fine wines as we produce them. Wines don't do additive flavors. Or, more correctly, when wines do additive flavors, they become a different class of thing. If you think about things like vermouth or port, these are examples where they are adding other things to the wine, changing what the wine originally is, and are within the world of wine, but took a long time to be considered in that fine wine world. I don't think that the bourbon barrel age world in the spirit barrel age world is there yet. This is really much more a gimmick of anything. And while I will always stand by my view that taste is subjective, drink what you like, right? You're going to see this in the same place that you're seeing wine. By the way, to just go back to marketing for a minute, if you look at some of the bottling, remember that 60 some odd percent of people polled basically by, what was that? Nielsen basically reported that they don't make wine buying decisions until they show up at the shelf. So shelf differentiation, i.e. labeling, is one of the big concerns for people. In other words, how they choose. You could also see how setting yourself apart by bottle shape, if you suddenly have a bottle of wine that's in a spirit shaped bottle, it stands out. It's, again, another way to differentiate and kind of get your product through. It's gimmicky as hell, but do what you got to do, man. It's fair market. So anyway, like I said, drink what you like. If you like this kind of stuff, awesome, good on you. We're about to try some here, right? Live on camera. But when you compare, spirit barrel aging should be in a separate class of wines, just like ports, vermouths, or other wine plus somethings. Okay, they're a different class, and importantly, there to its own benefit. In other words, to not compare apples and oranges, although they are both fruit. They have you want to compare what's good, and we talk about quality. Then you need a separate comparison scale because they don't fit the wine model. In other words, I'm not going to be trying, or I'm going to have to try to compare this to a Cabernet Sauvignon because that's what it is. The problem is I should absolutely not being expected to be on style when it comes to cab. It should not taste like a Monterey County cab, which, there we go, another random thing. We talk about, again, the way that these wines are targeted and the way that they're talking about economy and the way that they're inexpensive to make, and they're less targeted at that. You're not seeing the primary hallowed grounds of the big grape producers where wines get their main names from jumping on this particular bandwagon. You're seeing lesser fruits from places like Monterey, Paso Robles, the Central Coast, Central Valley, Lodi, etc. You're not seeing cab from Napa on Rutherford Hill go into a bourbon barrel. I mean, people would lose their damn minds. All right. And I think also they would be like, well, why would I throw those pearls in front of that? That's kind of the problem. So yeah, my bottom line there is mind your hype. The market growth is about chasing dollar signs, not excellence. These are wines that are not necessarily built for high quality, or rather, they're aiming at a particular quality level, but they are not in the same realm as certain other things. And just be aware of that. Um, I'm going to have to eventually do a kind of a price point comparison. So the wine that I bought today, this is a grocery store grab, is like $14. But I mean, I'm seeing stuff from some of these labels up there in the 20, almost $30 range, and I'm going, okay, I want to put that next to a bottle that I know punches really well, or even is in that quality $20 to $30 range by itself, and do a kind of that value comparison. And it's one of the I'm very very interested to see this, and not to be preconceived about it, but I'm betting they don't punch out straight. So I think that's a lot of hype based pricing. So end rant. Let's talk about the grocery store grab. It's time. It's time. It's time to drink. So the grocery store grab, for those of you that are just joining us, and I don't think any of you are, but for those of you that may watch this later in posterity and awesomeness, the grocery store grab is a concept where we try and get the best value per dollar for wines that are found at non-specialty and non-big box retailers, i.e. your grocery store. Not everybody has the luxury of shopping at a fine wine store or even a big box brand name wine store, and often for convenience or necessity, do our wine shopping at a grocery store. This is a label-focused exercise, and we do this without prior research. I don't go looking up information about the wines and then go purchase them. I purchase them ad hoc, just like I would if I was at the grocery store. In fact, I do it while I'm doing my grocery shopping. So these are, I don't want to leverage who does good labeling, because that tells us what's in the bottle and what we can expect. So, without further ado, today's selection is the Robert Mondavi Bourbon Barrel Private Selection. Okay, so this is a Robert Mondavi gig, which one of the reasons that I said if I was going to dive into this, I didn't want to have to go through the tax maze, let's put it that way, the business maze that is who owns who and what. For instance, Apothic, for those of you that are red wine blend fans, is a Gallo product, right? It's not its own brand, right? And therefore, I wanted something on the label that I knew who it was, rather than trying to sort through the who's and who's behind the wine. So this Robert Mondavi selection has a kind of a classic, iconic label, right? Shows their particular their tower that is their logo namesake, right? It's got all the information on the front label that we want. Robert Mondavi Private Selection, basically it's their branded sub brand, aged in bourbon barrels, tells us what's special. Cabernet Sauvignon, we have the grape. Monterey County, 2018, where it from and when it from. All very good, solid on the front. They're not really doing a lot of fancy, although notice they are doing that kind of masculine black gold kind of thing there. And you can look at it the other direction at that very elegant kind of concept. They're not going kooky wacky. They're very straight laced there at Mondavi for this purposes. So on the back of the label, what we got is the repeat of basically the top line items from the front. But this limited release Cabernet blends the craftsmanship of California winemaking with the Southern tradition of bourbon whiskey aging. Our coastal California vineyards deliver deep flavors of black cherry and blackberry to the wine. The next step is to age the blend in bourbon whiskey barrels for at least 3 months, adding nuances of vanilla, brown sugar, and toasty oak. Okay, so like we talk about the things on the label, things we like to see. We want to see flavor words and specific pairings for food, if rather than general ones. Now, we're not seeing a lot of food pairing information on a lot of our wines these days, but generally speaking, this has got all the things I usually want to see. It's got variety, it's got grape type, it's got where they're grown, it's got flavor words. As far as labeling is concerned, this one's pretty solid. I would call it a B plus, A minus. Just if they would give me some food pairings here, this would be an ideal thing for a novice to pick up, because all the information is on there. Even, because again, imagine you don't know what the Cabernet Sauvignon grape tastes like. This at least is giving us those ideas that it should be tasting like cherry, black cherry, or blackberry. Okay. Again, not a very nuanced look at Cabernet Sauvignon, but that's not the point, especially given that we dunked it in bourbon. So there's that whole thing. So anyway, like what I saw on the label, was a great choice for the selection. Was originally listed price at $18. That's the grocery store pre-club price, but it's $14 if you have a club card. So I would definitely put this again in that $14 range. But one of the things that I think we're noting, the longer we do this grocery store grab, is the greater the variation between the list price and the actual price. The sticker price and the what you pay walking out the door. I think the more risky, if you will, the wine is, the more it's trying to appear to put on airs that it is a higher priced, higher quality wine. That bottom line price, that club price, those are the things you're comparing if you're comparing directly across to, say, a big box store like Total Wine, Siegel's, Specs, Goody, etc. Those should be roughly equal. And so I would, again, we're going to treat this quality wise as if it's a $14 bottle of wine. Okay. So that puts it in the high end of the grocery store range of the common, kind of bulk wine category, but nothing over the top. Okay. So then when we talk about tasting notes, we don't run the full sommelier kind of grid here. I will do a kind of a tasting of my own, but we're going to just run through, is it well executed? Is it on style? And is it worth the price tag? Because those are kind of the things that a person who's new to wine, especially might be shopping in the grocery store, is generally purposed looking for, right? And when we're not talking about the nuances of those things like acidity and all those other little the parts of the wine aging and tasting experience that we might know as experienced wine drinkers, but we're looking at this from that new kind of look. So I'd say hi to, we see that Teach and Reba got here. We see that Barbara got here. So hello to everybody. Good to see you guys. So color-wise, looking at this as far as Cabland is concerned, like you guys can see, but there's no light. I need to get like a special light underneath, maybe, that I can show off color. That'd be neat, wouldn't it? So anyway, color-wise, we're looking at a solid, what I would expect out of a cab. It's got kind of deep dark garnet, very clear, is reasonably clear, not highly extracted. We can see through the wine reasonably well. Don't see any flaws as far as things are concerned there. No gassing, nothing that makes me go, oh, this wine must be bad. It's been sitting in the glass for a good 30 minutes now, so it's got some air in it. I'm going to swirl it around even more and take some smells. Okay, comes across on the nose with those black fruit flavors. I would say blackberry, black cherry. It does come out of the glass. It's very assertive. It's not very quiet. There is a definite brown sugar creme brulee, something in the back, almost buttery, toasty kind of thing that's going on in the nose that is different than I would expect if I was to do this blind. If I just had to have this in front of me, I'd be going, wait a minute, something quirky this way comes. Because you normally don't get that fresh toasted bread, buttered bread note, especially from this style of wine. I would even say that for like something that is in traditional method like Champagne or Cremant, the type of toast you're getting is slightly different. That it's more yeasty, whereas this is definitely more melted butter, right? Melted butter over your sweet yeast rolls, which is the title of my third album, by the way. Okay, let's get a taste here. Okay, that's a thing. So it's a quick 1-2 punch. There's when you got it on your palate and you start moving it around, you start getting those red wine sensations. This is actually surprisingly decent in acidity. There's a little bit of lingering mouth-watering thing going on here. So the pH on this and TA are probably pretty reasonable. Which again, if you think about that from the red wine perspective, red wines are higher on the pH scale, closer to water, less mouth-watering than whites by and large. But having a red wine retain acidity is nice because that mouth-watering is good for food pairing. So this actually surprisingly has that. But the 1-2 punch comes in this cherry berry flavor that then quickly gets into that caramel brown sugar and maybe even smoky or again, it's like it's that burnt sugar caramel thing going on. That's what I get out of that barrel. And it finishes, there's the query of whether it's malolactic, which gives it that buttery, but I'm actually smelling and tasting in the back of my jaw the exact same thing that I did on the nose, and that's that melted butter, that buttery kind of sensation that I got out of the first primary aromas. It lingers on the tongue for a bit. It's got a medium plus finish on the length as well, and most of that is those lingering barrel-esque flavors, which not uncommon from other wines. But what we're not seeing is any of that terroir, soil subtlety. Now, I wouldn't bet that this wine was aiming at that. That's not, I don't think, the purpose of this wine style at all. And so don't look to find that finely ground sage, graphite, mint, and a tobacco pouch thing that you would out of a fine cab, because this isn't a fine cab. This is a souped up standard car, not a sports car. If you put flames on it, it will actually go faster. But yeah. Okay. So from a well execution point, again, being new to the style, it's a little bit difficult to talk about execution and as a whole. But I will say this: it is well executed in the sense that it is a red wine that retains its acidity. It's got solid flavors that carry all the way through. They're clean and they're well defined. It is not muddy. It's not slushy. I like the fact that everything in this is good from a fit and finish perspective. So from a winemaker's perspective, I think this is on. It's not flawed in any way. It doesn't have that trying too hard feeling, and in fact, it also doesn't feel like they're cutting any corners. When we tried the Menage a Trois Midnight Dark, for instance, that was a wine that felt like they over malolactic. It had just this generic-y berry flavor kind of thing, and it was supposed to be an on-style red blend. Whereas this, at least, it's got that cherry thing going. It's got it's got a couple of clearly defined things. I would call it black cherry. I might call it a little bit of a hint of a plum, and maybe blackberry. If it's going to be blackberry, I'm going to go blackberry jam, not blackberries fresh. But anyway, they are there and they're clear, which is nice. So fit and finish is good. Is it on style? I'm going to have more of these before I can really comment on that. But I'll say this: it brings the bourbon to the fore, and it's not an overall mouth hammer. It doesn't completely dominate my palate, which is one of the things that I was kind of worried about with several of these styles of wine. This stands up pretty well. It is very much a part of both the nose and the mouth. It is definitely in the band and willing to make some noise, but it is not, just dominating it with a big sax solo. On the last one, is it worth the price tag? Yeah, for $14, I don't think you're going outside the realm of wrong here. There are wines that personally I prefer better, but that's strictly personal. That's not something that I would say has anything to do with your taste go along this. This is a well-made wine from a well-known producer that, even stripped of its bourbon barrel aging, would be a perfectly acceptable sipper. Bring to somebody else's party kind of thing. Leave the bottle there because you're not gonna miss it. But really, all in all, I mean, I am not displeased. It is not one of those wines that I would say, I would never drink that again. That is awful. No, this is interesting, I gotta say. So what do you guys? So let's talk a little bit of it. Let's get some Q&A going here. Everybody just kind of saying hi and talk through. I've been rambling on now for 35 minutes. So let's talk about your experiences with spirit barrel aging. Have you guys have tried a few? Just actually, to go off my own beat and topic there before I get your Q&A. I have not tried any of the rum barrel ones, but the other ones that I've considered, and one of the other things that I considered really just kind of a WTF was when I saw the tequila barrel aged Sauvignon Blancs, right? Well, because Sauvignon Blanc as a grape style, as a varietal, is rarely, if ever, oak aged at all. So the idea of adding the agave flavors from the tequila barrels is a real big question mark to me. I don't see the advantage in it. Whereas when we talk about flavors in bourbon, we talk about a lot of baking spices, cinnamon. There are all these warm flavors that come along with the bourbon world that I could easily see being complementary to things like Zinfandels, Cabernets, Syrahs, and those are mostly where these things are in the wheelhouse, right? This is where I think those styles at least made sense to me, whereas throwing Sauvignon Blanc inside of a barrel just seems criminal. But again, that's just me. Barbara says that she's had one of those and it isn't bad. Isn't bad. Okay. I mean, that's good. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the world that isn't bad, but I don't suggest you put it in your mouth. Just a personal suggestion. That's just me. So I mean, but from the bourbon barrel perspective, has anybody ever tried some of these other brands? Some of the Cooper and Thief, by the way, is the one that does the Sauvignon Blancs. They also though do a lot of Zinfandels and other such things. Reba says that she's had a few beers and wines that were bourbon barrel aged, and I'm not a big fan. Then again, I'm not a big fan of bourbon. Okay, so there's of course a starting point is to Reba's point, not going to appeal to everybody if you're not already a bourbon or brown spirits person. So there is that. I am, for the other end, by the way, I said bourbon barrel aged in beers. I really enjoy. There is a bourbon barrel rye ale called the Bourbon Street Pale from Abita that is freaking amazing. I love it. It's a delightful little toasty creme brulee thing, and with the beer flavors of the particular grains that are used in that, it is because like rye, for instance, which by the way, primary component of most of the bourbons I like. The alignment is natural, but that's me. And again, that's where I'm trying to figure out what's natural in those same things when it comes to red wines, and I'm kind of seeing the point. David Mary said they've tried a few barrel aged cabs. They're okay, but if I want bourbon flavors, I drink bourbon. Very, again, kind of align with you there. That idea of when it comes to wine, I mean, we spend almost all of our time in the wine world talking about the flavors that aren't grape, which is really interesting when you think about it. The last thing one usually says about wine is, oh, it tastes like a grape. In fact, a wine that is grapey is generally considered kind of juvenile or poorly made. It's not high quality, which is a fascinating part of the wine making process. That the origin fruit is not really the desired outcome. It is that transformative process that we aim for, and all these other nuances. So it's hard to say, if I want this thing, I'll drink that. But I also see what we're talking about, and that is when bourbon is a desired flavor. When I want the things that bourbon brings to the table, all that. I mean, and again, by the way, we're talking about a whole different class of mouth heat with our bourbon proofing. To begin with, we're in the world of spirits, which is a very different mouthfeel experience, and how those flavors are carried is a very different thing. Reba said that our pal Jeremy is a big fan. Said he tries them when he comes across them. Well, excellent. We're gonna have to get some feedback from Jeremy in the comments when it comes to it about some of his go-tos and see what's what. Jeremy's been to several of my classes, so he should have a reasonably trustworthy palate. I mean, he can't be trusted to do a lot of other things, but he can be trusted to at least give us some feedback on those. And you can tell him I said so if he's not listening right now. So David Mary said beer and bourbon are cousins, which works. Well, yeah, I mean, grain-based things, right, as opposed to grape, right? And so that grape and grain crossover is an interesting. And my mom points out, I'm much more fan of bourbon than tequila, right? I mean, for instance, Barbara does not drink, don't drink a lot of tequila by itself. I mean, now I enjoy both. I certainly don't enjoy both equally, but I would say for certain that when those flavor profiles come through, do you have to be an enjoyer of the original spirit in order to enjoy the wine combo. That might be interesting. It might be one of the things that is one of the just the limits to the style. Um, is it something where you're gonna get a market share out of people that already like bourbon or rum or tequila, and that's enough? I said $91 million in market share does not suck. Although I'd have to look in some of the industry rags and go check out what the numbers are, where that puts it in growth lines with other beverages of its sort. Because having a number 91 million in the abstract doesn't particularly do us anything. It's that growth that was mattered, though. 800K to 91 million in 3 years. Put me on that stock train. I mean, damn. So, and then case growth, of course. I mean, the amount of time and effort. Um, I think it's that same sort of thing that we've seen, though. To just go back to the idea of this entire series, is these are wine trends, wine fads, wine hype. These are those things where you know the market is driving, not the consumer, all the time. There's a the market is desperate to always to light a spark that will rage in the consumer market, either to develop something or to redevelop a love for something. For instance, I haven't really included the rosé trend in wine fads simply because it's not even really new. It's just more of a cyclical thing. I think what we're seeing is a current rise over the last few years, not a not a long standing. I think it went through a lull point, but where it's more coming back to standard. And by the way, its growth as far as year on year for stuff that we're selling in 2020 is down a little because of the tariffs and the world falling apart. But generally speaking, is still one of the top growing categories. We're not even going to get into the whole seltzer thing yet. That's a separate topic. But the question, if I like crossovers because I've had beers from wine barrels and didn't care for that. Now, there's an interesting point. Maybe you guys came on. I think you guys came on after this point, but earlier I was talking about the Venn diagram between the beer and the wine world, and I'm going to do a special show on those hybrid style products. Which would include topics such as wine aged in beer barrels, beer having aged in wine barrels, wine must being used in beer production, dry hopping your wine. There's a lot of, I don't know, let's put this in that. I mean, very Bunsen and honeydew level science in the wine world, I got to say, and the beer world. So, and again, awesome. I love experimentation. I love innovation. I love the idea of getting out there and finding that something amazing that we're gonna go, oh my god, this is great. Make more of these. The weird part is, I hate it when the market it's not the market that drives, but it's the marketeers that go, of course you love this. It's delicious, just like you wanted it to be. It's like, I'm gonna wait and we're gonna see wine in its new gel form coming in 2021. Now you get wine in caplet form. Ask your doctor about. No, anyway, I'm not going to do that commercial right here, but it's only because I haven't written the material yet. But boy, I'm writing that down. That's a joke that's going in the bag. Yeah, wallops you with the brown sugar. Now the interesting thing, style. I didn't mention this earlier. It's not sweet, but it has perceived sweet flavors. If I haven't mentioned that before, I probably ought to do a short video about that too. And that is the idea of, one, human beings are bad at determining sweetness levels. We just aren't good at it. Our tongues are not sensitive enough for it, especially in the curve of when you look at the amount of grams per liter of sugar within a beverage, specifically wine. Our detection threshold ends far where a lot of wines live. So the nuances between a few grams here and there that the wine world uses to use such words as dry, semi-dry, and sweet are all within a range that we can all very easily misinterpret. Not only that, but the science of aroma and the way that our memory works, we tend to associate particular aromas with a particular mouth experience, and our brain can trick our palate into thinking that. for instance, if something smells like sugar or cotton candy or burned sugar or caramel, we would expect it to be sweet because most of our experiences with that aroma equal the actual, cane sugar being transformed by the Maillard reactions and all that, or caramelization, which is separate. But anyway, I think the idea is that because it has caramel smells all over it, you want to think it's sweet. But if you listen to your tongue's going, no, dude, there's not really any sugar here. This is not a thing. So, my father. So anyway, Jello wine shots. Wow, John Kerry. The weird part is, I mean, they wouldn't become, I don't even want to know how that works. I mean, it's bad enough when we have, Everclear and Jello shots, but your wine for so. Zariba was saying that so enjoy that kind of innovation. I always try it. Yeah, exactly. I mean, having a willingness to try new things, is part of the gig, right? That's that part of that free your mind and your glass will follow mentality that I have here. At WineShark is that you got to give things their fair shake, and even if sometimes some good sense can overcome you. You can realize that maybe those things really aren't up your alley. But really, when you look at things from a critical perspective, how do you make sure that you're giving things their what I call their three strikes, right? Because generally speaking, when it comes to food or anything in the taste world, it's all about having three opportunities. And the reason I say that is rather than just giving things a single shot, unless you're somehow allergic or have a truly violent reaction to them, moods, expression, preparation, etc., can cause problems. In other words, flawed wine, for instance, can give people a poor example of what wine should taste like. So what if you only had a cooked or oxidized version of your first bourbon barrel aged wine? It wasn't supposed to taste like that anyway. But you then set that as this is what these taste like. Well, you've not actually had the actual product yet. So once is certainly not enough. Twice, I usually give it the idea of, especially if you're trying something different under better conditions, it's a question of subjectivity. 2 is still just not enough of a sample size. That third try is usually what I consider the magic moment of, okay, I really just don't like this thing. I mean, I've had it prepared by the best. I've had the quality that I've had it at quality. I've had it at preparation. I've tried it under different conditions and theoretically under different emotional circumstances. Therefore, if my enjoyment after that third time isn't reaching that, then it's probably time to set that down as that's not for me. So, yeah, as Barb says, be teachable. Absolutely, for 100% believe in that. Don't be locked in one's ways. It goes back to the beginning of the show, the stuff we were talking about back then. Talking about keeping innovation and keeping changing attitudes and all that sort of thing. It's got to do with your whole life. So, what other questions do you guys have? It's open Q&A time. I don't have any more topics for you. I've rambled at length about the various things. You've got a few good, 5-10 minutes of Q&A in you. So, open floor. What have you got? Questions, comments, lewd gestures, etc. Nothing. A silent room. A few amount of people in here actually to do so. I'm surprised. Well, then that's a little disappointing. But we'll throw in some stuff here. Talk about upcoming things instead. So this weekend, Teach says he needs a suggestion on mead. I would recommend trying wine. Or rather, I would recommend asking a mead expert, that of which I am not. Unfortunately, mead is generally speaking not my beverage of choice. A, because of its sweet tendencies, and B, simply out of the fact that opportunities to try good options are pretty infrequent. And therefore, my experiences with it are both limited. And I've tried it 3 times and still no thanks, even though there are several types of it. So a couple you like, but you need more options. Smart. Well, don't look for me. I mean, you Teach. You can't just say that I want you to be a mead fan now, WineShark, and then you will go ahead and give me examples. I am a wine educator, not your personal shopper. Let's be very specific about my role in your life. I'm here to make you laugh. I'm here to make you fall in love with wine. Those are my jobs. Finding you new mead, not really my job. That's an adjacency I'm afraid I probably won't really ever pursue. However, if you are an awesome mead person out there, if you are a self-made or otherwise made mead expert, I would love to hear from that and add that to our repertoire of good things here at the Wine Shark. So, if not that, I would gladly give somebody's good recommendations. So, John Kerry said, I needed recommendations on an iPad Pro keyboard case. Excellent. Okay. So, again, I guess I did say open floor. So, good news is I would recommend that you try the one in purple because that's obviously clearly superior color. And therefore, you will type both faster and with better spelling. So, consider using something like that. Have I tried the Northern Grapes? Brianna, Niagara, Maracol Folk. Okay. I like the fact that they're the Northern Grapes there. What we were talking about, native non-vitis vinifera varietals. And the answer is no. I have not had an opportunity to try those three particular varietals. I would be interested to find out whether they are species varietals or whether they are what's the word I'm looking for? Or they talk about breed varietals within a particular thing, like say Vitis rotofunda, Vitis lambrusca, etc. Right? Fox grapes, muscadines, things like that. I'd be interested to know where they fall genus and species wise, and whether those things are discrete. Because if they are truly different types of grapes in each individual one of them, that would be very interesting. I'd also like to see how they compare and what they're supposed to be equivalent to in the wine world to find out whether there is a grape to grape comparison between each one of those things. That'd be fascinating to know. For instance, the outside stuff that I know about non-Vitis vinifera grapes, because they so dominate the fine wine world, are things like Blanc du Bois, which is a cross of, I believe, Vitis rotofunda and Vitis vinifera. So I'd be interested to know which one of those species they fall under. Sour beer aged in Pinot Noir barrels. Yes, Mark Midland, I have tried sour beer aged in Pinot Noir barrels. My friend Bob Floyd, certified Cicerone, and he actually brought out something that was a sour aged in Pinot barrels. And it goes along some interesting lines. It is that interesting space in between where, first off, sour beers already have that one thing going on for them, right? They are already an interesting style in the beer world, very apart from many of what people would consider traditional beer styles. But also, the idea of bringing in that grape barrel, and I've also had ones that have used grape must and even grape yeasts, all individually and separately. But they've got I think what you see there is that they have a robustness that is different from other sours. But the weird part is that in that where that nuance lives in the sour world, I think that's something where I didn't really get that it got much from the Pinot Noir world. In other words, it was a sour and it was purplish and there was some stuff going on, but there wasn't necessarily a ton extra I could call for it. Again, was not unpleasant to experience, but it just wasn't one of those things that I was running out to see another one of. So purple is so regal. It is true, John Kerry. That is absolutely true. So, all right. Well, let's talk about what's coming up in the near future here. So as we're winding down, we've got wine and cheese part 2 this week. So we're going to cover the basics of kind of cheese and cheese classifications, just like we did in wine cheese 1. Just we're gonna go through for the people that weren't there, and because just you can never go through the basics too much when it comes to new topics. So we're talking a little bit about that, but then we're going to pair 2 different wines with 2 each different cheeses. So we're going to learn all about those, do some comparing and contrasting, and really kind of dig into some of the styles of cheese as much as we do the styles of wine. It's a lot of fun. It's probably one of my favorite Wine Plus shows. So we're doing a little Viognier from the Infinite Monkey Theorem, brought to you by the High Plains AVA out there in Lubbock, Texas. And then we've got an Erath Pinot Noir from Dundee in Oregon, which is Willamette Valley. which I've been to actually. And then we've got some fine cheeses from France, from Holland, and from France again, I think. So we've got some Comte, some Comte, some Tome, some Havarti, and some double creme brie. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So you guys should get your prep on ready. I'm going to do my buying for cheese tomorrow. My wine's already in my cellar, so I don't have to worry about that. For the rest of the month, we've also got Zinfandel picnics and Pinot Noir to round out July. So really encourage you guys to come and join us on the online tastings. They're way more fun than just listening to me talk and watching me drink, because you get to do it along with me and you get to participate with live questions on Zoom. So it's pretty darn awesome. All right. So, guys, when this video goes live after you're done, ask you a favor to go down to the comments section and tell me about, do you love them or you hate them? What do you think about spirit barrel aging in wines? Is it somewhere in between? Tell us about your own experiences and give us any suggestions that you want us to try. I might dig them out for future use in either grocery store grabs or as featured wines in other places. So, if you like what we're doing, we certainly appreciate your patronage and you guys, all of your excellent questions and participation. You guys make this such a fun job to have. So if you like what we're doing, hit that subscribe button and ring that bell so you get notified of new content that we do every week. We also, of course, share with a wine-loving friend. Keep that crowd growing. The more questions we get, the better, and the more people we convert to drinking awesome wine. And if you really like what we're doing, support us over on Patreon. We've got exclusive content over there, including special drinking lists. We've got early access to ticketing for major events. We've got all kinds of fun stuff. In fact, the entire archives of all of the tastings that we're doing are all on there too. So even if you don't get to come to a show, you can actually go watch the show later and drink the wines in the comfort of your very own home and without even having to participate in the Zoom meeting. So it's like a win-win. It's like a meeting. It's like a work meeting with no pants on. It's really, there's just no downside. So, all right, guys. Well, with that, I'm going to sign off and say thank you all very much once again. We will see you here on WineShark Wednesday next week when we are going to talk about reduction as a flaw. And we're going to see what's what and how that works and talk about the pros and cons of wine flaws. So a little more technical talk for you next week. And until then, cheers. I have been your Wine Shark. Talk to you later, guys.